People tell me that the Catholic Church persecuted Galileo because Galileo discovered a theory that was against the Catholic Church and what the Catholic Church had held for thousands of years. And it was Galileo who proposed heliocentricity when the church believed geocentricity. And since Galileo started stepping on the church's power and stepping on the church's toes, the Catholic Church persecuted him and threw him into the Inquisition and stopped him from doing scientific work. And they even put him in jail. Some say they put him under house arrest. Others say they put him in rat-infested prisons. The bottom line is that people say that the Catholic Church attacked and persecuted Galileo for scientific reasons. But if anyone actually studies this topic, they will see that the opposite is in fact true. The Catholic Church did not persecute Galileo for scientific reasons, and the Catholic Church, in fact, encouraged his scientific work. Now, people will yell and scream at me and say, no, clearly the Catholic Church persecuted him. They sent him to the Inquisition. So how can you tell me that the Catholic Church was not against heliocentricity? And for those who don't know, geocentricity was the belief that the Earth is the center of the universe. Heliocentricity, this new theory, was the belief that the sun was the center of the universe and the Earth and planets revolved around the sun. Now, they will say to me, how can you believe that? They put him in the Inquisition. They tortured him. They tried to make him recant his position. And you can't tell me that the Catholic Church wasn't against Galileo. And right after this, I'm going to tell you what I tell these people. Hi, my name is Bryan Mercier. If you've never been here before, I'm the founder and president of Catholic Truth, an organization dedicated to the Catholic truth, to teaching and preaching the truth of Christ and helping Catholics to know, live, and love their Catholic faith. If you didn't know, we do retreats, confirmation retreats, Catholic school retreats, conferences, parish missions, and we do book drives, we do YouTube, we're starting a podcast. We're trying to reach as many people on as many platforms as possible so we can evangelize the world. Now, back to the video. So people will say, you can't tell me that the Catholic Church didn't persecute Galileo because they did. He preached heliocentricity. That disproved what they believed. They didn't want to be embarrassed, and so they persecuted him. So I always tell people that Nicholas Copernicus, before Galileo, researched, studied, and promoted the theory of heliocentricity. In other words, Nicholas Copernicus preached and promoted and studied and worked on the exact same theory as Galileo. And guess what? He was never persecuted for it. So what did Galileo do differently than Copernicus to get him in trouble? The church didn't have a problem with Copernicus preaching on that. They had no problem with Kepler preaching on that, who was a Protestant. And in fact, it was the bishops of the Catholic Church and certain people within the Jesuits who encouraged the heliocentricity with Copernicus. He was so nervous to publish this work because he knew he was going to come under fire, not by the Catholic Church alone, but by the whole world. And why? This is an important context. Nobody in the world really believed in heliocentricity. There were people before Galileo and Copernicus who suggested this theory of heliocentricity. About 2,000 years earlier, they suggested it. But Aristotle and Ptolemy at the time demolished their arguments so sufficiently that no one even bothered to question it until the time of Copernicus, who was doing scientific research and started to notice some evidence against geocentricity. And so Copernicus started studying it, and he created this 6-volume work called On the Revolution of Heavenly Spheres. And he was afraid to publish it because no one had questioned this in 2,000 years, and here he is with brand new breakthroughs. But the bishops of the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, convinced him to publish it. And guess what? He dedicated it to the Pope to show that neither the Pope nor the Church was against heliocentricity. I'm going to say that again. He dedicated it to the Pope to show that the Pope and the Catholic Church neither were against heliocentricity or Copernicus's work on it. And in fact, the Protestants persecuted Kepler for it. And it was the Catholic Church who gave Kepler a microscope because he couldn't even afford to get one because they wouldn't even fund him. But it was people in the Catholic Church who helped give Kepler some funding and helped get him a microscope so he could do his work. And he did a lot of good work on this. Enter Galileo, who continued this work and made some great breakthroughs, some promising breakthroughs on it. The difference between Kepler and Copernicus and then Galileo was that the first two treated this as a theory only, because it couldn't be proven yet. But Galileo thought that he could prove it even though he couldn't yet, and he started treating this theory as a fact. Now, there were two problems with this. Number one, the Jesuits were funding him, and they wanted to be rational and scientific about it. So they were saying, don't preach this as a fact until we know for sure. We have to overturn 2,000 years of history here, and we're not going to do this rashly, so don't preach it as fact. Second, which we'll bring up in a minute, is that Galileo started preaching against the theology and the teachings of the Catholic Church and the Bible. And that, as we'll see, is what got him in trouble. Because initially, everybody loved Galileo. He was a celebrity, and perhaps it went to his head a little bit, but the Jesuits funded him. They gave him money. They said, do your scientific work. We love you. They threw him parties to honor him in dedication of him because they loved him and because they loved his work. They were happy to fund him on this and in other scientific areas as well. But the problem in the difference between Copernicus and Galileo is that Galileo started preaching it as a fact. Nicholas Copernicus never did that. And that is what started to get Galileo in trouble. So they sent him to the Inquisition to recant his position because it's not a fact. And this is probably where the church was wrong because they're overreacting about this and they probably overreacted too much to it. But the fact is the Catholic Church didn't do it for scientific reasons, as we'll see in a minute. And even after this, even after the church said, don't preach on this right now because it's too, confusing. It's too problematic right now. It was the Pope, not a bishop, not a priest, not a cardinal, a pope, the Pope, who was friends with Galileo. He went to visit Galileo and he said, tell me about this theory that you've found, that you're forwarding. And Galileo and him had a long talk, and the Pope himself reopened the case for Galileo and said he could continue working on it because of what he heard. And he liked what he heard. It sounded promising and he wasn't against it. But he went on to tell Galileo to proceed cautiously, to treat it only as a theory for right now and not to preach something as fact that we don't know is a fact, especially if we're the ones who are funding you. And then Galileo really got into hot water because he continued his work, but not only did he treat it as a theory, he continued to promote it as something more. And then he actually started to say that the church was wrong, that certain Bible passages were wrong. And he went on to write a book about a conversation between two people. One who was old, outdated, and kind of held to outdated modes of thinking, and then a new person who is smart, intelligent, and enlightened. And once the Pope and the church read his book, they realized that he had taken large excerpts of the conversation between the Pope and Galileo, and he put them in the book. And the smart person was Galileo giving all these new theories, and the dumb person in the book was the Pope, who was holding to outdated theories. Now, the Pope wasn't necessarily holding to these outdated theories. He was just giving the objections and saying, listen, this is what the rest of the world believes. These are the objections that you would hear. So he wasn't saying, oh, it has to be this way. This is the way. He was just giving natural explanations. And Galileo went on to insult him and tell him that he was basically dumb and anyone holds to this is kind of less than intelligent. And Galileo probably wasn't the most prudent person in the world. And this is what got him in trouble because he insulted all of the people who were funding him, who were helping him, who were promoting him. Not a good way, not an intelligent way to work if these people are on your side. And he continued to promote it as a fact. So both of these things got Galileo in trouble, and he was told to stop working on this theory. Now, for some people, they'll say, see, that's just proof. I told you it's proof that the Catholic Church is against science because they made him stop working on it. But the reality is he was allowed to work on every other scientific theory he was working on in addition. And in fact, some of his best work in science came during that time when he was placed under house arrest. And Galileo was placed under house arrest, not in a prison, not in a rat-infested dungeon. He was placed under house arrest with a servant and with the latest amenities, this huge area where he could do all the scientific research. It was just, this one was too high profile. It was too controversial at the time. And to be honest, this is why Pope John Paul II, many centuries later, apologized to Galileo in a sense, because the Catholic Church overreacted in how they handled the case and how they got insulted and just ripped it all away from him without having probably a sufficient discussion about it. But the Catholic Church wasn't against science, and in some ways they were acting scientifically because the Catholic Church wanted him to preach it as a theory until he could prove it. And during his lifetime, Galileo did not have enough evidence to prove heliocentricity. That wouldn't come till at least 50 years later with the dawn of more technology that was needed to confirm many of his theories that he was right on but couldn't be proven. And what the church was saying is, we just want to be able to prove this and have scientific fact before we preach it as a fact. So in that regard, the Catholic Church was acting prudently and scientifically, perhaps more than Galileo, but they also reacted emotionally and a little bit out of control by just rashly removing all of this from him and not allowing him to preach or teach on it just because they got insulted. Now, sure, he got into hot water for getting out of his scientific realm and into the theological realm. You can't get into theology and start saying the Bible's wrong and the church is wrong. Like, that's heresy. That's what he got in trouble for. That was the big problem. If he didn't do that, he would have never had this heliocentricity stripped away from him. In other words, if he had remained in the realm, in the area of science alone, and didn't wander off into theology and heresy, he would have never gotten in trouble. He would have been on the same playing field as Copernicus and Kepler, who both shared this theory, both promoted it. Neither of them got in trouble because they didn't get into heresy and heretical acts. Now, this is the reality of the story of Galileo. Many people blow it up. He was never tortured. He was never thrown in prison and rotting. In fact, you can probably see in the background, I have a book right here on Galileo's daughter. And you might be interested in reading it. It's a lot of letters between Galileo and his daughter. And what it shows is amazing. It actually shows that Galileo stayed in good relationship with the Pope and the Church. He continued his scientific work. Some of his best works came after that time, and both of Galileo's daughters went on to become nuns. They went to become nuns because he had a good relationship with the church. He died in good graces with the church, and both of his daughters became nuns. That is something that no atheist or anti-Catholic, well, number one, doesn't know, but two, ever speaks about. And these are important facts to create the whole context of the Galileo story. It's not about being anti-science. It had nothing to do with anti-science because Copernicus taught the same thing, not a problem. Kepler taught the same thing, not a problem. So these are the facts on Galileo. This is the short version of what really happened. And if you want to read more, you can check out Galileo's Daughter and a few other books that I have up there. But it's a very interesting story. The Catholic Church, as you can see in our video above, it's not against science. The Catholic Church loves science, promoted science, advanced science for over 1,000 years. And it's no different here. This cannot be used as malign against the Catholic Church, or that the Catholic Church persecutes everyone who disagrees with them. That is just anti-Catholic rhetoric, anti-Catholic bias that wants the Catholic Church to be wrong and is trying to find any excuse to prove the Catholic Church wrong. Again, my name is Bryan Mercier. I'm a professional Catholic speaker, a retreat leader. If you would like us to come to your church to give a confirmation retreat, a parish mission, or anything, apologetics seminars, anything at all, check out our website, www.thecatholictruth.org. There you will find a myriad of articles and videos and retreats and different things to help promote, encourage, and build up the Catholic faith. Please support our ministry. You can go to our website there, hit the donate button through PayPal. You can support one time, yearly, or monthly. And your support helps us to reach the world, a world that's dark and a world that desperately needs it. So please help us by supporting our ministry, by liking this video, by subscribing to our channel, and if you can, leave a comment down below and let us know your thoughts. May God bless you and have a great day.